It is 7:17 p.m. on May 20th, 2025. So I have, since I've changed the format, um, I've been a bit more lazy with this journaling. And I have a lot of, or quite a few notes I want to talk about. But the reason why I'm doing this today isn't to go over the notes, but instead talk about the recent bombing of an IVF clinic. And I got a hold of the audio manifesto of the guy, and probably contrary to what many people believe or expect, he sounded pretty sane, and the points he made, actually, I do agree with a lot. And my takeaway from this is that this guy was too good of a human being. This guy was too pure, too, I guess, ethically good to exist in this world. And perhaps maybe, I don't know, yeah, I guess. Because, I mean, I think I've talked about it before, but I am also an antinatalist. But not pro-mortalist. Although I believe euthanasia should be a right, I don't believe in acceleration of death, if that makes sense. But basically, his main point was that was a very how should I put this? He understood life as this zero-sum game, and it's a phenomenon that what I liked about the way he put things was that life is, the default state is deprivation. That I mean, that makes sense. Default state, you lose stuff. You know, you don't have enough nutrition. You maybe mentally feel miserable if you're lazy. Society doesn't function on laziness, that people have to do stuff. And if you don't, like, for example, exercise, then your body, you experience atrophy, and that could be detrimental to your health. And basically, you have to chase, you have to keep consuming, not just in the context of capitalism, but you have to keep consuming. And that's how he saw life. That is a sort of drug, I guess, of sorts. And it's a cruel, the world is cruel, nature is cruel in a way that we consume each other. And with that, and with the concept of deprivation, the deprivation is default. Life is basically suffering, or existence is suffering, I guess. And that's why he desired to die, because probably, I would assume, in his personal life there was other things that made him more pessimistic towards life. But also he had an understanding of, or he had this why, why make the effort? Why does he have to put himself in a position where he has to consume others? He has to be consumed. He has to fight. He has to chase. He has to suffer. It didn't make sense to him. Yet, as a society, we normalize it so much, and we try to make the sort of questions he would ask completely taboo and absurd. To villainize. I think it's a very easy thing to villainize. But the truth is, yes, the reality is really the villain. And he wanted out. It's just he wanted to say, hey, the things I'm saying are not taboo. People should be discussing this. That's why I want to raise awareness, at least. And go out with a bang, quite literally, I guess, to draw attention. I think a weird twist on a martyr, because martyrs basically, you're kind of sacrificing your life, or the message you want to put out is so strong you would sacrifice your life. But this guy, his main point is that he wants to die, and that we should have the right and people should choose to die earlier, I guess. So he's like pro-mortalist. So he's not really sacrificing his life in the same sense as probably a conventional martyr. So there's a weird twist to it, but so I don't even know if you would call him a martyr. But definitely an active ideology. I guess terrorism? Yeah, because it would be going against sort of authority. But I think it's very clear that he's not an evil person, because an evil person would have put, actually try to target other people to murder. I think there were injured people, but I would assume that was, maybe I shouldn't assume, but I really don't think his intention was to hurt others. His intention really was to kill himself and raise awareness. Although, of course, financially, he hurt the IVF clinic and the stores nearby. So in a way, to spread his message, he still acted on a form of consuming others. There's that hypocrisy or irony, but at the same time, I think his whole point is that that's inevitable, that he will end up consuming others and others will end up consuming him, and that he does not want to be, in a world that is such a fundamental aspect of it, that consumption is a fundamental aspect of it. And of course, antinatalism goes more into the point that whatever situation it is, the issue is that when you come into existence, you don't have consent over it. I don't see any way around it. The moment you can consent, you are aware, so therefore you're already alive. So the big issue is that, yes, you cannot, you're forced to exist. And then the question is, okay, but then I actually agree with a lot of his points. So the difference is, okay, why am I not necessarily suicidal? What the question I asked myself after listening to his manifesto is, where's the difference? Why do I not have any intention of really doing what he did. And honestly, I have to think a bit. I think I want to let it rest and kind of develop my thoughts even more. I think one is that I'm not necessarily as a good person or as a pure person. I think to overcome certain moral dilemmas I have with consuming other animals or participating in at least a bit of the zero-sum game is that I ignore the unethical implications of my action. One because when you start digging these unethical implications, it's very hard to avoid it. You know, it's tiring to constantly realize or criticize every step you take. And then the second is that it's so normalized that, you know, it's like, what the hell, you know? It's so normalized, it's too tiring. Is it even worth? You know, I think, I think, oh, it is what I think, but one of the rules I follow is to try to find the golden mean. It just works well. I don't like to be a universalist, but that's something that's almost close to universalism that I understand. And the thing is, even with ethics, morality, there is a sort of golden mean that at least I see in approaching to being an ethical person. And when you really think about it, it's also just a conflict of id and superego. And I think an interesting way to put this is, okay, maybe the guy has such a powerful superego, but then I think no, not really, because he probably had a very strong desire to really convey this message, convey this discussion. He was definitely frustrated with how much this, you know, concept has not been discussed, and how much that he was being censored on the internet. And coming from an antinatalist perspective, I understand how it seems so obvious to us, like, Jesus, don't give birth. It's horrible. Don't. It's, to me, it's this cruel. I'm inevitably criticizing my parents, which I don't like to do, but really, giving birth is a sort of God complex. It's a it's I really feel uncomfortable saying this, but it's a very selfish thing to do, because you're allowing death to happen. Basically, you're allowing pain and suffering because of your own desires. You're forcing existence onto someone for the sake of your own needs, you know. And you can try to say, oh, no, but, you know, I gave life to you. That I nurtured you, and I sacrificed myself. I gave you everything to be a good parent. And that may be true, but then the question is, did I ask for it? You know, that it doesn't matter how much, because life is objectively, yes, it is a pain because of death, because of impermanence, um, along with other suffering. But at the end of the day, what makes life pain, at least from my understanding, is impermanence. Um, so it is pain. And then saying, "Oh, I did all this for you," is sort of it almost sounds a little ignorant and God complex. You, in a sense, you did it for yourself. Uh, uh, I'm very bad at wording this because I feel very conflicted talking about this because this is not something. I'm not trying to criticize my parents. I'm trying to criticize just how things are. And that's because the the cool thing I think about this whole natalism is that at least for me, once I exist, I don't want to die. That's sort of the core motivation for me. That it's just this like weird, twisted, messed up thing of um, you're forced into existence that you didn't consent for, and it's painful. But now that you exist, you don't want to not exist because that's sort of your innate wiring, I guess. Or I don't know if how innate it is for me, like rationally even. For me, like death is absolutely terrifying. Um, and then is this paradox of like, why am I forced to be in a situation where I have to face death, you know? But the only way out of that is if I never existed in the first place. And I don't want that either, because that's also death. Um, so it's this weird, almost like a grandfather paradox situation. And I think that's, as I talk about this, that would be my answer, I guess, to the difference between why I would not do the things this guy did, although I agree with a lot of things he did, because I think maybe he didn't really go into too much of why like life is I guess life is objective pain because of the zero-sum game. Maybe that was the point. But for me, life is, well, it's weird saying objectively painful when I am talking about when fuck. It's weird that I'm saying using the word objective when it's two different perspectives, I guess. But at least for me, I see it as objectively painful because of impermanence, and that is, in other words, death. And so I want to do everything to avoid that, you know. So that's what makes me not pro-mortalist, despite being anti-natalist. It's almost a paradoxical stance, I guess, but also not really because of what I just explained. So yeah, that's about it. But I do believe what he talked about should be shared. It's an important topic. I brought it up antinatalist with a few people before, and the amount of avoidance and rejection before they even try to think about it first is a bit upsetting to me. That um, it has a really the ring to antinatalism is so negative from the get-go. People just reject it before trying to take it in. And how taboo it is, even internally, because it ends up criticizing my parents. And I think it's also weird because, but I think the point is that life isn't black and white, right? So I want to criticize the system, but at the same time, it's not like I hate my parents. It's not like I trying to say, why did you give birth to me? It's not a clear answer. And but maybe to this guy, it was a lot clearer to him. He saw it as black and white, which is one way to look at things as well, And he probably went through a lot more than what I did, or what I have. And yeah, and he just wanted to express, share this situation. I do wonder if there were other methods, but I guess when I think about that, that's me sort of pushing the life addiction onto him, right? That was his whole point. He wanted to die. So yeah. Is there anything else? Oh, and then the one thing I don't agree with negative antinatalism and his point is negative utilitarianism. Because the thing with negative utilitarianism is that it would end in murder and death, because technically killing someone now probably prevents further suffering in the future. Or, well, that's the main argument, right? Although, to me, I feel like death is pain times infinity. Although shoot. Although, like, you don't experience pain, I guess, when you die, but it's sort of in the same category to me, that it's like, at least to a certain level, no amount of pain leads to the desired pain, I think. Does that make sense? Yeah, that should make sense. Yeah. So yeah, those are my thoughts. But it's not unfortunate. I feel like this could maybe be a good catalyst to bring about antinatalism a bit more. Although people, the antinatalist people saw that it's bad, talked about how it's bad optics, and I completely agree. But at the same time, I feel like it's bad optics for the audience who would have had bad optics to begin with. I think some people just never understand where this ideology comes from. but I feel that there will be those that would be like, huh, why did the guy bomb an IVF clinic? What is antinatalism? Why did he kill himself? There'll be people that would ask questions why, especially when the FBI is taking down his audios. And I'm really upset that it's being censored, but I just hope I understand why it also gets taken down. Maybe there's this fear that it could instigate more of the more similar incidents, or worse yet, people go a bit more extreme and start killing people for this negative utilitarian, becoming a negative utilitarian hero. And so I understand why perhaps the FBI are taking it down and censoring it. But these are the type of things that should be out there and for people to discuss, people to see. What makes this manifesto interesting? Why is it wrong? What parts do you agree? Or like in my case, why do I agree yet I don't want to do the things he did? Why do I still disagree with his actions? That is the important part, and I wish people would be able to open up and discuss. I wish people would be able to open up and discuss more freely. That's it.